Second rarest Saturn game. Well, you're probably thinking, so what's the rarest one? Panzer Dragoon Saga? Radiant Silvergun? Nope. That honor goes to Deli Soba Deluxe, a racing game where you ride on a motorcycle and deliver soba. The Japanese love a good portmanteau, so delivery soba becomes deli soba. It was based on a skit from a Japanese comedy show in the 90s called Tokyo Friend Park, and I can't find out much else about its origin beyond that. It was never available to buy in stores and was only ever given out to contestants of the show, so it's limited to only a couple hundred copies. Deli Soba Deluxe was actually developed by Cave, bullet hell shooter connoisseurs responsible for the Dodonpachi series and Mushihime-sama, along with many others. Deli Soba Deluxe is very similar to superscalar games like Outrun. You've got 120 seconds to get to the end of the course. The controls are floaty, there's no variation in the track, unless you want to use the track editor to make your own, but there are obstacles, like other cars, herds of cows, and Donkey Kong on the back of a flatbed throwing banana peels? Yeah. At the end, you arrive at the stage for the television show, and that's it. The game just boots back to the title screen after that. So, there it is, the rarest Saturn game. And I know someone may already be typing this in the comments, but yeah, I know about Heimwaltz. But can we really consider an interactive tour of 2 model homes given out by a housing company a video game? Yes, you heard that right. A Saturn disc that a housing company gave out to sell model homes. I'll at least acknowledge that it's probably the rarest Sega Saturn disc of all time, but calling it a game is a bit of a stretch. Anyway, onto the actual topic of this video. The rarest game that you actually could have gone out to stores and bought was Shindei Jusatsushi Taromaru, aka Spirit Assassin Taromaru, aka Spirit Slayer Taromaru, aka Japanese is way different from English and there are many ways to translate this title, so I'm just gonna go with the most common one I've seen. Psychic Killer Taromaru. Psychic Killer Taromaru was developed by Time Warner Interactive and released just before they closed up shop in 1997. I couldn't find out much else about the development history, but I did find a scan of this badass Japanese print ad. And because Time Warner Interactive was on their way out the door, only about 7,500 copies of Psychic Killer Taromaru were ever produced. Now, rarity doesn't automatically equal quality, as we've seen, but in the case of Psychic Killer Taromaru, it's good. It's really good. Before we jump in, I want to give a special thanks to the Dungeon Dwellers who support this channel through Patreon and YouTube memberships. If you want to join them to get your name in the videos and other perks, stick around until the end to find out how. Psychic Killer Taromaru is a 2.5D action side-scroller. You play as a ninja who's hired by a man to rescue his daughter, who's been kidnapped by demons. These demons are also terrorizing the city of Edo, known in modern times as Tokyo, so we'll be needing to stop that as well. The short cutscene before the title screen is all we get in terms of story, though I do appreciate the wonderful sprite work and beautiful art direction here. It seems the man who gives the job doesn't have much money to his name either, since he offers only a single gold coin as payment for his daughter's rescue. This is subtle, but gives us a look at the type of people the 2 main characters are. And yeah, there are 2 main characters, Taromaru and Enkai. They work for almost nothing, so even though they're clearly powerful, as we'll come to see, it seems their work isn't so well respected in this world. So when you start up the game, you get to choose between the titular Taromaru or his buddy Enkai. They play slightly differently. Enkai feels a bit weaker, and his attacks don't seem to chain in the same way that Taromaru's do. But either way, pick the one you think looks coolest and get going. I chose Taromaru for my recorded playthrough. I should also mention there's a 2-player mode as well, which is pretty awesome. The beginning shows us a group of maidens being kidnapped by some ninja before Taromaru teleports onto the scene. We have our character portrait and health, depicted as a burning scroll, in the upper left corner of the screen, as well as our number of lives, along with a power meter underneath the health bar, and there are also some symbols and numbers to the right. The top one is just the number of enemies you've killed, and the bottom is your ally's health. More on the ally system in a bit. You can jump with C, and by holding down and pressing C, you can perform a slide move. Tapping down twice or pressing X will create a shield around the character for a brief moment, and I'll go into more detail on the utility of the shield soon. Psychic Killer likes to play with both foreground and background elements, and this is shown off right from the first encounter, where we're thrown into a mini-boss fight against two giant skulls attached to long spines. A health bar appears on the bottom of the screen, and purple fireballs start raining down in the foreground. Taromaru can dodge these, or he can use his shield move to dissipate the projectiles. And this is very important. In the beginning here, the designers are easing you into things, but later on, the screen will become filled with projectiles and enemies, and sometimes the only effective way to not take a hit is to time your psychic shield move, which will block all projectiles, as well as negate most physical attacks. You can also use it while in the air, which will allow you to float for its duration, and can be helpful for dodging certain boss attacks. It's an extremely powerful tool in your arsenal, and should never be ignored. In fact, a certain boss about halfway through is almost impossible to get past without making use of this move. The invincibility only lasts for a few frames, and it has a short cooldown period, so you can't just spam it over and over, but it's incredibly useful. Eventually, these two skeleton heads will move into the foreground, so we can begin actually damaging them. Instead of using a sword or shuriken like some normal ninja, Taromaru and Enkai use psychic powers to attack enemies. Taromaru shoots psychic blasts from his hands while Enkai uses his staff. This symbol floating around the character will auto-target enemies and sometimes projectiles. You can change targets by pressing either L or R and changing the direction Taromaru is facing. Once something is targeted, you can press B to perform an attack, and you can't move while attacking, which takes a bit of getting used to. The psychic blasts can be rapid-fired by tapping the B button. If you hold a direction button first and then press X, you can auto-fire. Or you can hold down the B button to charge the energy meter displayed beneath your health bar. Once the meter is full and flashing, let go of B and Taromaru will unleash a powerful psychic blast, which in this case instantly kills one of the skull bosses. Another fully charged blast will take out the other. Now, you can go through the whole game just rapidly pressing B to attack everything, and you can even make it to the end that way, but it's actually not the most effective way to get through the game. As I mentioned, you'll eventually be swarmed by enemies and projectiles, and the best way to get through is to charge your attack and release the B button, but don't immediately press the button again. The targeting symbol will begin darting around the screen, and you can combo kill enemies this way. This is incredibly satisfying and worth practicing and learning the nuances of, because Psychic Killer Taromaru is relentless. There aren't even any real stage breaks. You're always walking to the right, except for a couple of vertical variations here and there. And the game goes from your starting point with the two skeleton mini-bosses pretty much all the way to the final boss encounter in one continuous journey. But even though there are no stage breaks, the game is balanced around combat encounters where the designers have carefully selected enemies so that specific groups attack you at certain points. And each encounter is almost like a little puzzle. If you have your attack charged and unleash it at the right moment on the right enemy, you can clear an entire encounter in one attack. That's the brilliance of this game's combat system. Many of the boss fights are also designed in this way. Bosses may release smaller enemies or projectiles that can be targeted, and charging your shot and chaining the attack will result in big damage on the main boss. I'll admit though, figuring out the intricacies of every encounter is difficult, and there were certain fights and bosses that I just cheesed by rapid firing, because it was easier than trying to figure out how to chain damage on them. Psychic Killer Taromaru has a very arcade feel to it, but it's a bit more forgiving than a lot of side-scrolling arcade beat-em-ups or running guns, because there are a lot of moves in your repertoire and systems working in your favor. I don't think the game ever had an actual arcade version either. It was developed exclusively for the Saturn. There's one other layer to the combat that I briefly mentioned earlier, and that's the ally system. The A button also releases a psychic blast, but this isn't an attack. It's a hypnotizing move that can cause certain enemies to become your ally. These are limited to human enemies, different levels of ninja. They change color so you can tell them apart from regular enemies, attack on their own, and follow you through obstacles. They have their own health bar, which is the number next to the second symbol at the top of the screen, and when it's depleted, they'll disappear. But you can also make them explode to do damage to other enemies, and that will allow you to then hypnotize a different enemy, since you can only have one ally at a time. They're not really all that powerful, but they do sometimes distract other enemies, and like I said, the game likes to overwhelm you, so having a decoy is helpful. It's a shame it doesn't work on some of the demon enemies though. Having them follow you around would be fun. One complaint I could lodge at the game is the lack of enemy variety. There are palette swaps of human enemies that are stronger variations of the same 4 or 5 basic types. Then there are certain demons like these slow-moving abominations, fire wheels, and changing floating faces. There are some Tengu-like enemies, shrine maidens, and demons with Wolverine-like claws later on, but you're pretty much introduced to most of the normal enemies within the first 2 areas of the game. The artwork is really nice, and the animation is smooth, even though the sprites aren't the most detailed. And soon after the first fight, you'll notice more of the 2.5D elements on display as the perspective begins to shift as you walk through the city. Many of the buildings and structures in the background are made of 3D models, which allows for a lot of this perspective manipulation. Sometimes you'll turn down side streets or walk along the edges of a building. It's a nice visual flourish that adds more character to the world, since you're always essentially just moving left to right. And this will end up being used in more creative ways as the game continues. The soundtrack is also fantastic, this awesome mix of traditional Japanese instruments and melodies, along with heavy percussion. It just makes you feel like a badass as you blast enemies with your psychic powers. The sound effects are, for the most part, standard explosions and blasts, but some of the bosses have cries, yells, and other little sound bites that help to heighten the atmosphere. The presentation overall is incredible. We have to avoid a stampede of bulls or oxen, I'm not sure which they are, but you just need to jump over them and walk on their backs. Shortly after, we'll encounter the second mini-boss fight, a pair of skeleton demons. They aren't too difficult to deal with, ducking avoids their attacks. Then we come to a bridge. After dodging some dynamite thrown by a few Batwing-wearing ninja, we face off against a giant centipede that likes to move between the foreground and background. It even has an attack where it encircles the bridge and tries to squeeze down on the character where he's standing. This can be avoided by moving or sliding out of the way at the last moment, or using a well-timed psychic shield. A floating demon sorcerer is our next major encounter, who's just a beefed up variation of a normal enemy we've already fought. He has his own shield around him and can summon fireballs, floating faces, and other normal enemies. He'll run away a few times and reappear, and can only be damaged when his shield is down. He'll summon a final floating demon head encircled by Magatama that bounces around the screen when he's about to die, and destroying that leads directly into the main boss of this first area, a giant spider. Easy enough to deal with, just duck as it charges you and either slide or use the shield to avoid the projectile. After a leisurely stroll through the rest of town, taking out some normal enemies and a group of zombies along the way, Taromaru boards a ship, and this sailor is not happy about having a stowaway. Disarming him of his weapon, and then literally disarming him, has him transform into a large demon. There will eventually be several targets: his arms, his head, and his main body. As soon as he's dealt with, we see a giant skeleton wreaking havoc on the town in the background, Godzilla style, smashing buildings and causing citizens to run in terror. The foreground opponents are these ninja archers on kites who can be chain attacked into the boss. They need to target you with their arrows, and they have their own silver targeting symbol to show you when they're about to shoot. The boss in the background will also occasionally breathe fire into the foreground, which will need to be jumped over to avoid. This is a great multi-layered boss fight and one of the most memorable set pieces in the game. It's moments like this that almost make Psychic Killer Taromaru worth that 4-figure price tag. And by almost, I mean not at all really, but it's still awesome. We leave the ship and arrive in what could be called the second stage if there were stage transitions. But it's a forest area. The path leads to a larger building that we'll be traversing through, but along the way there are stalls with daruma and goods for sale and other paths leading further back into the forest. Like there was some kind of festival happening here before this demon invasion took place. Again, I like how the designers thought about the journey the player would take through this world during the course of the game. Psychic Killer Taromaru does a lot to make its world feel alive. Unfortunately, you probably won't notice many of these details as you'll be too busy dealing with the onslaught of enemies. A new enemy type appears, these red kunoichi, who sort of end up looking like Mai Shiranui from King of Fighters when they're killed, as their pants rip up like this. Oh yeah, your psychic attacks aren't just simply killing enemies, they're making them explode from the inside out, a la Fist of the North Star style.
Away! お前はもう死んでいる。何?
It's pretty gruesome once you stop to notice it, and it happens to almost every regular humanoid enemy. Along the path, we'll run into a demon nailed to a tree that uses the tree's branches to attack, and we need to fight on this seesaw-like plank of wood. It can launch you into the air and grab you, and you'll be assaulted by fireball projectiles as you struggle to get free. I also experienced my first death here. When you die, you get the old ninja turns into a log of wood trick, and then come back to life. There are continues as well when you run out of lives, but they're not unlimited. Past the demon tree, we've got a stampede of spiders this time. Can't walk on their backs. Near the end of the path, Taromaru runs into this mother and her young son. Maybe some NPCs that need to be rescued? Oop, nope, she just cut off that kid's head. A large snake arises from the spot where the boys stood, and we're facing off against a woman with a giant chakram riding a giant serpent. We can use the serpent to our advantage to avoid some attacks, and chaining these slowly descending explosives that the female ninja tosses out from time to time does big chain damage, but it's difficult to get a fully charged attack off depending on your positioning, which will constantly be changing as the serpent moves around the screen. After taking care of her, we can enter this large building in the forest. This descending section has turning pillars in the background, which remind me of that one area of Mystical Ninja on SNES. At the bottom is a pit of fire with fire-wheel demons that's pretty difficult to maneuver through. Then it's a race against the rising flames as you climb up moving platforms with spiked obstacles. Fun. I also forgot to mention earlier that health pickups come in the form of food. These dango sticks heal a bit of health, and rice balls heal a large amount. So Psychic Killer continues the long lineage of video game characters eating random food off the ground. Also, extra lives appear as tiny ninja dolls. Look at that. Adorable. We ride a moving platform up, avoiding more spikes, and at the top face off against another boss. It can only be hit when it opens up, and meanwhile, bits of the wall in the background will move forward and damage you if you're standing in their way. Luckily, they can also block some of the boss's projectiles. Unluckily, they can also block our psychic attacks. The room will turn from time to time as well, and we'll need to make use of our slide move to avoid running into the boss and taking damage. We take a short ride on another moving platform, this time heading left to right, and come to the staircase segment. There's a large floating skeleton moving these energy balls towards us, and all the while, as we're attempting to climb the stairs, Tengu enemies will continuously spawn and throw mini tornadoes at us. This can be an incredibly frustrating segment if you aren't patient and paying attention to your positioning. Near the end of the climb, the floating skeleton will become a boss, and this was the fight that I was talking about near the beginning of the video, where you need to make use of your shield, or you'll be stuck in a stalemate. The fight itself is simple enough. Just shoot these flames that the boss makes appear, and they'll fly into the boss, causing damage. But as the fight continues, the flames become too numerous to handle, so you'll sometimes need to clear them with the shield. Once you understand the rhythm of this fight, though, the boss can go down pretty quickly. Just a few more sets of stairs and Tengu enemies, and we come into a shrine area. This is where charging up your attack and chain-killing groups of enemies becomes really effective. Otherwise, all the different enemy types being thrown at you with their various attack patterns can quickly become overwhelming. At the end of the area, we face a shaman-like enemy and a shrine maiden, and my ally just started going ham, spamming sword attacks. Jesus, buddy. After the shaman is dead, we hop on a bridge and get attacked by a giant frog. This is a really cool boss. The frog will slam its arms down to try to hit you while spitting out these floating pustule things that will explode into shrapnel. Then it will brace the side of the canyon walls and start to suck you in towards it. You need to shoot its arms to get it to break out of this attack. It also goes underwater and lays eggs that will float around and try to hit you. After depleting its health bar, it eats us anyway. And then we're inside the frog's stomach, dodging drops of stomach acid and keeping these creepy worm creatures that pop out of these holes that appear along the stomach wall at bay. It's disgusting. The frog explodes, of course, and we enter a minecart section with our own character as well as enemies moving between the foreground and background as the minecarts follow this track. It's chaotic. We face off against a boss that seems straight out of Gradius or R-Type.
Destroy the core!
And then, ooh, no more track, and we're falling through waves of fire circle demons, which I think I've now called different enemy names every time they've appeared, but I don't know what the hell these things are. While still falling, we get enclosed in this strange ball and have to fight a large eye demon, which again reminds me of something out of Gradius or R-Type. We manage to fend it off, but are stuck inside the ball. This adds some momentum-based movement and platforming to these small hills and across these swinging platforms, and you need to destroy these vine-like enemies to get the platforms to swing so you can make the jumps. It's a neat little section once you get used to the change in movement. Finally, the ball around us dissipates, or we enter further into it? I'm not sure, but either way, it's another boss fight. This time in a Mode 7-like corridor where obstacles move at us from the background. Getting a lot of Tempest vibes in this fight. It's pretty cool. As the boss explodes, these rays of light break through, and we find ourselves in a burning city. Probably the one that we saw being destroyed by the giant skeleton while we were on the boat earlier. I don't know for sure, but that would be a neat bit of continuity if that were the case. Pretty standard enemy assaults at this point as we twist through this area, but the docks have a really cool reflection of the burning city in the water. Then we have to jump on this log, which reverses your controls, and is a pain to deal with when you're trying to jump up to the key at the end, because as soon as you're in the air, your controls revert back to normal. You'll also probably be knocked back onto the log by the enemies who have the high ground, and the stupid butter knife wielding wizard on the boat shooting lightning at you. So this bit is pretty frantic. His ship blows up, and now he's inside this large, six-legged contraption. You can destroy the legs that try to stomp you, or you can just focus on the dude inside. The slide move is very helpful here. And now we've made it to the beginning of the final area. You'll face off against combinations of normal enemies in these different rooms, and these are just really well-designed little encounters here that can make great use of quick chain damage kills if you take a bit of time to think things through. At the end of the corridor, you'll face a possessed suit of armor. The first part of this fight is one of the most annoying in the game. The armor will fly apart, and the blue spirit will possess one piece at a time, and you need to quickly target the possessed piece to actually damage the boss. Once you've got it down to about half health, the armor will form together, and you'll just need to attack it like any other boss or enemy. Past the possessed armor is a geisha who transforms into a nine-tailed fox demon, another of the coolest looking bosses in the game. This fight requires some patience, and the boss will occasionally sprout alien-like eyes to fire volleys of lasers at you. At this point, most bosses have two phases, so once you get the fox down to half health, its body and most of its tails disappear, and you're left fighting this floating fox head that rotates around the room. The tails are very damaging, so you need to move around them and hang from this ceiling railing to try to avoid them. Once the fox demon is dead, we ride its decapitated head up the pagoda. Yes, indeed, you heard that right. And I was expecting some kind of side-scrolling shooter section here. If I'm being completely honest, I was really bummed when I realized that wasn't going to happen. We're dropped right into another boss fight against a giant gooey worm monster. How much more suggestive can I make that description? Probably very. But anyway, this is the beginning of the final boss gauntlet. Targeting the mouth, or ass end, I don't know which, is the key. Once you take one of them out, the other just starts to slither around the screen, and a giant fly is ejected from it. Just focus on the fly and watch out for the homing projectiles and maggots that crawl toward you. Turn the corner of the pagoda into the next boss fight, another giant spider. And this one is deceptive, because it starts off exactly like the one in the beginning of the game, but once you destroy it, it reforms and now has a warrior holding a sword on top a la Quelaag, but less horny. This creature can push you back with gusts of wind, and will also drop blue balls on you that explode. Yeah, let that one sink in. It also makes lightning shoot out of its sword, and does a powerful slash attack with its spider legs. On the next side of the pagoda, we're up against a floating monk-like creature that summons bug towers of different heights. In the second phase, there are these sci-fi looking floating balls that have a laser ping-ponging around the screen. This is where I just kind of crouched underneath the boss and rapid-fired it to death, because I got sick of trying to dodge this laser. After that, this boss actually has a third phase, where a rip in reality happens and demon hands reach out and try to grab you as you're sucked toward it. The slide move will get you away, but the boss is also throwing projectiles at you. On the fourth and final side of the pagoda, we fight this ball that passes through these other balls. God, this game loves balls. And it's kind of an annoying fight. I don't have much to say about it. This thing then transforms into a giant demon embryo kind of thing with, you guessed it, spinning balls, shooting lightning. The lightning balls will then turn into great balls of fire. Finally, after defeating this creature, a hole is blown into the side of the tower, and we enter to find the final boss, sitting casually, awaiting Taromaru's arrival. But then he stands and teleports away, the little bitch. The upper half of a giant marionette-like demon is the second to the last boss. It can slap us down, throw balls of energy in clusters, and shoot a laser blast that will explode across the floor. All of these do a lot of damage. After its arms fall off, the head starts floating around the room, spewing blood drops, and a large green symbol will sometimes fly out from its torso area. Making use of the shield move is the best way to avoid that, as it takes up most of the screen. Defeating the marionette transports us to the roof where the final boss is waiting, and he tells us to watch him display his true power. Then he transforms into a dragon-like creature with 3 arms, each one holding a different weapon. A staff, a sword, and whatever the hell this boomerang type thing is that he throws out from time to time. He can also split his body in 2. The dragon upper half will breathe fire, and the weird Uncle Fester looking lower half will drop these bugs onto the ground that can be targeted for chain damage against the boss. This is a tough fight. Once we beat him though, we're treated to a final cutscene with Taromaru and Enkai on the roof as the dragon's skin melts off his bones. And we've also somehow rescued the girl through all this chaos. Over the end credits, we see the girl return to her father, as well as Taromaru and Enkai parting ways. All in all, Psychic Killer Taromaru is a tightly designed arcade-style action game. The gameplay is fun and addicting, the added depth that the background elements provide heighten the experience, and it just feels badass to walk through stages blasting away enemies with psychic powers. It reminds me of a mix between old-school Castlevania and the Shinobi series, with its own unique twists on the gameplay. The bosses are absolutely the highlight here, and there are also some fun set pieces scattered throughout. Pacing is tight, and the whole experience should only take about 45 minutes to an hour to get through, but the replay value is high because the game is just so much fun. There are also other difficulty settings to try out in the options. The game defaults to easy, which actually provides a well-balanced challenge, but you can attempt the normal and hard modes if you're feeling up for it. They increase enemy health and damage, as well as the number of projectiles during certain segments and boss fights. Psychic Killer Taromaru is easily one of the best games on the Saturn, so it makes it a real shame it was so limited in its initial release. Like many of the Japan-exclusive Saturn games, this is a title that the Western Saturn library desperately needed. But unless you want to shell out nearly $2,000, you've got to play this one any way you can. So that's Psychic Killer Taromaru. This video was a bit different from my other ones. I usually do story-heavy games, but I wanted to try out a game that had no story and see how it's received. So let me know in the comments what you think of this style. If you liked it, be sure to hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't already. All these things go a long way in supporting the channel. If you're interested in helping out more, you can donate to my Patreon, link in the description below, or you can hit the join button to become a YouTube member. All supporters get to watch videos early, get exclusive updates from me, and occasionally vote on what I should cover next. So become a dungeon dweller. Join us. If you donate $5 or more, you get your name read out loud at the end of videos, like these Dungeon Architects. Benifer 94, Half HP, High Food Court, Izzy Lexus, Kyowa, Mr. Sunshine Jr., Nekot the Brave, and Tony Lee, as well as these dungeon connoisseurs: Anjin01, Churm Slurm, Chiral Spiral, Crippler Jones, Dazed Clockwork, Dika Diko, Goats and Goblins, Irregular Rob, Joshua Weber, Mr. Independent, Old Dead Lemons, Samuel Pandiangan, True Axiom, Warrior Song, Where Am I? Help, and Zach Diedrich. Thank you all for your support, and thank you for watching. What say we continue this psychic powers train? Galarians is the next video, so look forward to that. Until then, Psychic Killer Taromaru, check it out. Dungeon Chill, out.